Okay, so time for lesson number 21, which is about null and alternative hypotheses. Okay, it's the time of year where we're starting to lose our leaves and we're getting into winter as it begins to beckon and call. So let's finish strong. Let's keep pushing up and give ourselves quite the show of color and eye-catching ability that we have seen the last couple of weeks. I gotta tell you, this particular stuff is the stuff that drives me crazy. I don't know if it's my what if mind or whatever it is that's going on, but we'll try to keep it as simple as we can for you. There's very little calculations to do today, and I honestly think I haven't recorded the lessons yet, but I think the lessons are going to be, the videos are going to be a little bit shorter than usual. Why? Well, there's like no math to do in terms of like calculator work and numerical computation work. It's all understanding what different hypotheses are and, whether or not they're true or false or what type of error could be being made and so on. So we're going to go through, we're going to do the best we can to explain all of that to you. I got lots of examples to give you to get that explanation across. And then we're going to go over the homework the homework for homework number 20. That has some calculations in it. And then we're going to turn you loose. May go over some quiz answers as long as I have the results back in time. And that'll be the videos for this particular week. All right. So on to the very next slide. Some definitions for you, okay? The actual test begins by considering two hypotheses every time. They're called the null hypotheses and the alternative hypotheses. Now, null is the original hypothesis. So we use H sub 0, 0 for original, and H sub A for alternative, okay? The null hypotheses, and these two statements have to have opposite points of view, all right? The null hypothesis is a statement of no difference between the variables. They are not related. This can often be considered the status quo, and as a result, if you cannot accept the null, it requires some kind of action. I don't know about you, but that's a really difficult definition to wrap my head around. The alternative hypothesis, it's a claim about the population that contradicts the null hypothesis. That I can wrap my head around pretty easy. And what we conclude when we, if we choose to, reject the original null hypothesis. This is usually what the researcher tries to prove. What am I talking about? Let's try to clarify this a little bit. Here is a null hypothesis. They always have equal signs if it involves numbers and so on. The alternative would have a not equal sign or a greater than or a less than sign. So the null hypothesis can be equal, it can be greater than or equal to, it can be less than or equal to. The alternative to equals is not equals. The alternative to greater than or equal to is less than. The alternative to less than or equal to is greater than. So the alternative hypothesis, if you look here, will never have an or equal to with it. And the null hypothesis, with respect to probabilities and numbers and so on, will always have an equal involved in it, okay? So that's pretty easy to wrap our heads around, and that's a step toward understanding what it is that they're talking about with these null hypotheses and alternative hypotheses. The original HO, the null hypothesis, always has a symbol or with an equals in it. It always has a symbol with an equals in it. Let me say that again. It always has a symbol with an equals in it. The alternative hypothesis never has an equal sign in it. That's a really important thing, okay? Use an equals in the null hypothesis, and you can use greater than or less than symbol with the alternative hypothesis, okay? Now, a little bit more clarification. The null hypothesis, it's a statement about the population that is either believed to be true or is used to put forth an argument unless it can be shown to be incorrect beyond the reasonable doubt. So it's a hypothesis we tend to think is true unless beyond a reasonable doubt you can show it's probably not true, okay? A good example of beyond a reasonable doubt, probably not true, would be something involving, let's say, a tree getting up and walking around, or um, a man being pregnant. Those kind of things are pretty easy to show they're incorrect beyond the reasonable doubt. The alternative hypothesis is a claim about the population that contradicts the original null hypothesis. And it's what we can conclude if we reject the null hypothesis. Okay? So, I think we're getting a little better understanding. Not a perfect understanding, but a little bit better understanding. I think these examples will help. So, the null hypothesis will be that no more than 30% of the registered voters in Santa Clara County voted in the primary election. The way I would write that is P is less than or equal to 30. That is the way we say no more than 30%. Notice there is an equal sign in the null hypothesis. The P is less than or equal to 30. If 10% voted, did no more than 30% vote? Yes. It did no more than, if 20% voted, did no more than 30% vote? Yes. And the alternative hypothesis is if more than 30, the alternative to no more than 30 is that more than 30% voted. So that would be P is greater than or equal to 30. Okay? All right. So the next one would be a medical trial is conducted to test whether or not a new medicine reduces cholesterol by 25%. State the null and alternative hypotheses. Think about that for a minute. What could a null hypothesis be, and what could an alternative be? Let's do stop and start before I fill in the answers. Okay. So a null hypothesis could be that the new medicine reduces the cholesterol by 25%, and it's actually 25% or more. Because if they say that it reduces it by 25%, if it reduces it by 30, it did reduce it by 25%. Okay, they're talking about when they claim, it's like if you're going to lose 30 pounds on this diet, if you lose 35 pounds, you still lost 30. So same idea here. So P is greater than or equal to 25. Now the alternative hypothesis, HA alternative, is that the new medicine does not reduce the cholesterol by 25% or more, and that would be that P is less than 25. Okay? P is less than 25. All right, so I'm pretty close to using up all of the memory for this particular video, so I'm going to stop it now. I wanted to get one more slide in, but I'm going to stop it now, and I'll pick it up on the next slide.